One of the more interesting gentlemen that we have gotten to talk to, Ricky Williams, who had an absolutely phenomenal college and NFL career and is having perhaps an even better career off the field. Ricky, thank you so much for taking time with FanSided and the Stacking the Box podcast. We appreciate it. You're working today with the launch of the Campbell-Williams Field NFT Collection, which I think is just incredibly cool that you and Earl are one being honored, which was just an incredibly cool thing last year, and now we've got an NFT collection to sort of underline it even further. What does it mean to you to see your name on that field along with Earl, and then something that people can take home and have as a piece of memorabilia / investment that honors you, Earl, and Texas and diversity, really?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really what it is. It's about honoring diversity and really commemorating. I think it's something that's quite momentous and amazing. And it didn't really hit me until I was at the game this past Saturday. And as part of the celebration, Texas invited back the group of the first African American players at the University of Texas. And unfortunately, that didn't occur until the early 1970s. And so as I was up in the box talking to the 1972 team, I had a chance to ask the guys a couple of questions. And I asked them, I said, did you guys know what you're getting yourselves into? And all of them across the board said yes. And that was the main reason they came to Texas, is they wanted to be forerunners of the future. They wanted to open doors and they wanted to get an education. So I was really touched. And in that moment, I realized this isn't about Earl and myself. This is really about diversity. And for the University of Texas, who's had a checkered reputation when it comes to diversity, for them to take this step and name the field after Earl and myself, I think is a huge statement. And I think specifically there's something about my story because I don't have a squeaky clean background, and still, there's my name on the stadium. So it's just really cool.
Well, I want to ask you what you mean by not a squeaky clean background. That seems almost too judgmental for you on yourself there. Because I mean,
No. I mean, I think it's judgmental. It's judgmental to expect someone to have a squeaky clean. What I mean by that is, and we still see it today. Okay, people are afraid to be themselves because they're afraid of the repercussions, the consequences. That's more of what I'm speaking to.
yeah.
I think so many times people hide parts of themselves they think won't be accepted by people, and to show that if you be yourself, even if being yourself is controversial, in the end, it all works out.
You were at Texas in the mid 90s and late 90s, 95 through 98 to be exact, and had just four phenomenal seasons. Obviously, your senior season is one of the greatest collegiate years ever. You talk about diversity and in Austin, Texas, and everything that comes along with that. So you get there less than 25 years after the 72 team is that historical marker. For you, Ricky, how much did you feel that diversity still needed to be pushed on Texas and pushed on the school and maybe even some of the fan base at that time? But did you still feel that heavily, even though it had been almost 25 years since the school had taken that big step? And if not, were you surprised at that, considering maybe some of the school's history and some of the area's history, to be honest?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's our country. More specifically, it's the South. And I think what's gone on in the past year or so has really brought a lot of old wounds to the surface. And often that's a very painful experience, but it's also a great opportunity to heal some old wounds. And we can't erase the past of this country, but we can continue to improve. And I think that's going to be a continual process. And I think, it's as weird as it might sound, I think the renaming of this field is really a positive step. And I'll tell you why, because I think it's the process. And I think the process of how this occurred is a model that can be repeated. It started off with the young people, the current players on the Texas football team, asking for change, and a wealthy alumni heard them asking for change and started to think about what he could do. And, Dar Jamel realized that he had an opportunity to ask the school to change the name of the field, and he did. And so the next step was the bureaucracy. And it happened in less than 2 months that Texas realized, wow, this is a great opportunity. Let's make the change. And so usually these kinds of changes, if they ever happen, take a long time. But the young people spoke. Right. The wealthy people listened and pushed the bureaucrats to get something done. And I think that's amazing.
I saw that, just doing some research on you, Ricky, that it was emotional for you just seeing the current crop of Texas students stepping up and being more vocal around, everything that's transpired in the last year. Can you sort of speak to like what was the most tender part of seeing, I guess, some thoughts that had obviously been there for a long time vocalized by the current crop? Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. Especially in this milieu, especially in college football. So when I was a kid, one of the reasons I wanted to grow up and become a professional athlete was because guys like Jim Brown, who were able to use their athletic ability and platform to have a voice. And so I was a little freedom fighter. And when I got to college, when I got to the NFL and I started to speak up, I was like attacked by the media and everyone told me to shut up and coach told me I was a distraction. And so I was silenced and it was, it was a tragedy. It was a trauma. And so to see that things have evolved and changed now to where players are speaking up and the coaches are supporting them, it's showing that I'll say it, Black lives do matter. And it's cool. And hopefully we keep moving in this direction. I mean, we're only a couple of ways from shut up and dribble. And so it's progress.
Do you almost feel like you would have been perfect for this era now? Like if you were coming out of college now, maybe even a couple of years ago, what with social media, with the way to get a message out there so quickly? And like you just said, really, look, still a long way to go, but the league now, whether almost forced into a corner or otherwise, is supporting a lot of these movements. We saw last year names being on the back of helmets, right, of people who had been victims of police brutality and whatnot. We've seen guys like Patrick Mahomes and others, many others in these videos in the wake of the George Floyd killing come out and speak out and really then be embraced for it. Do you feel like you ever see all that stuff and say to yourself, man, I would have been great now, like in time, because I'd be able to speak freely without any repercussions from a coach or from the media, the way you dealt with 20 years ago?
Well, sometimes I do, but then I think if there wasn't people like me, then maybe they wouldn't be able to do it now. So I think we all play a part. And when I see younger athletes speaking up, I feel like I'm a part of it. I don't feel like it's separate from me, and hopefully it'll keep evolving.
You said that you were silenced, and I know you had a very good relationship with Mike Ditka, by the way. I'm just curious, like who said, "Hey, we don't want that"? Was it Ditka? I'm just curious, like who was giving you that message back in the day?
Well, there's two ways. One it's unspoken, but also coaches will say, the media asks you a question. Don't tell the truth. It's a distraction. Just tell them what they want to hear. Or even the subtle, it happens in subtle ways, right? Because if the media is not used to an athlete saying a certain thing or saying certain things or sounding a certain way, it gets twisted because we're viewed through this lens of this is how a professional athlete is supposed to be. And I think that's the stereotypes. And I think that's the major thing that's changing is athletes are being seen as people, that have opinions and voices.
Do you think you would, I don't know, it's hard to put yourself in the shoes, but if you had Instagram and whatever, TikTok, Twitter, do you think you would have used that back in the day to get your message out? If you put 22-year-old Ricky of that mindset in today with all the social media, but add in, social anxiety disorder. Do you think that would have made it worse or better for you?
Well, I mean, I think you bring up an interesting point, because if we sit down and think about it, do we really want to hear what 22-year-olds think about the world?
Maybe, because right now, like, your name's on a field, because a lot of kids in their early 20s and late teens.
But it wasn't our thinking about the world. I promise you that. If you looked at our personal lives, they probably were a mess. And I think it's great. I think it's great. But the way I look at it, talent, especially the first half of your life, is you can't really take credit for it. You can take credit for developing that talent, but the true talent in life comes when you hit real life, and how do you deal with it? How do you deal and overcome adversity? I think that's the real challenge of life. And so it's nice to learn to express yourself. But I'm feeling I didn't know shit until I was late 30s. And so again, I think we learn about ourselves by expressing ourselves. But I think if you're in your early 20s, it's helpful to realize you're still learning. It's a learning process. It's about adventure and exploration. It's not about trying to have everything figured out.
I just feel like you get painted in the wrong corner. Like, hey, he's a weed smoker, and he's involved with cannabis now, and the dude just wants to get high. And it's like, but there's also like, the NFL gives guys all sorts of pills to try to get through the season, and now there's a movement to, hey, this is a much healthier way to go about it, to deal with the impact of playing the game. It almost feels like what you were shunned back then would be supported now, at least a lot more than it was, right?
Of course. Again, it's like, I think because people are being more honest, because what I found out when I got in trouble, most of the people that were talking or saying stuff, they are smoking too. People were just chicken. And so now people are being more honest, and we're seeing it. And so I think that's the major change.
Yeah.
It's interesting, really, with the NFL in particular. Recently, we've seen, I talked about in the wake of George Floyd, how the NFL really supported its players and allowed them to express themselves in different ways. They've aligned themselves with some of these movements in ways that even when Colin Kaepernick took a knee 5 years ago, the NFL was not willing to do. That was a stance they were not willing to take. And I also, we're talking now, of course, about marijuana use, and of course the country's opening up to it legally now, and things are just a lot different. But when you see the NFL, and I know you're such a fan of the game still, do you look at it and say, hey, we've come a long way? Or do you look at it and say, yeah, we've come a good ways, but we still have so far to go? And the league, with all the power that it wields nationally, globally, can be such a vehicle for change.
Yeah. And so, we're all growing and we're all evolving, always, no matter what. And that includes us as individuals, and it also includes corporations and organizations. And so for me, all you can truly ask is for progress. And I think we can say that, at least in the past couple of years, there's been progress, and hopefully it continues.
Where are you at, Ricky, as far as, hey, there's part of me that was an incredible football player, 10 plus years in the league, 10,000 yards, all that, incredible college career, versus like, that's just, a part of my persona, by the way, that I love, but I also, listening to you talk, you seem super excited about the growth and where you're going, and the more important things in life. I'm not sure why you're laughing, but I'm
laughing because it's funny. I mean, it's a great question. It's funny, but being at the game, it was great, and it was wonderful, and it's great to have my big picture up there in the field named after me, and right, it's still, I'm being celebrated for something I did like over 20 years ago, which great. But I'm excited about what I'm doing now, based off of all of the things I've learned during those experiences. And I think too much in our culture, we celebrate youth, but I think, again, it's more just like talent. I think we should really more be celebrating people who are doing bigger things later in life, where they've evolved that talent.
Yeah. Well, speaking about celebrating things later in life, I think it's important to go back and look. Obviously, every experience you have changes who you're going to be and who you are, and it colors the way that you see the world. You go to the Saints in 99, the draft, and the Saints traded their entire draft class to take you. And that is an ungodly amount of pressure. I don't care who you are, any player, how you want to handle it. And you end up going and you spent 3 years in New Orleans. You had a very good 3 years there, even though the team didn't have a ton of success. And I'm curious, like, how much did that experience from the way the draft went to your time there color your perspective and shape who Ricky Williams ended up becoming now, 20 years after the fact?
Well, it was everything. It was a wake up call. I think if I had gone to New Orleans and had the kind of success that I'd hoped for, I don't think I would have grown or evolved in many other ways. And I had a couple of moments in New Orleans where I realized that maybe there's life outside of football, and we all have to come to that realization. But I think sometimes players come to that realization too late. And so I think the struggles I had, mainly with injuries in New Orleans, really woke me up to the fact that there are other parts of myself that I needed to develop if I wanted to be happy.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you've been really open about, social anxiety and that being difficult at times. And just to piggyback on that last question, kind of follow up on it. Like I mentioned, Mike Dick and the Saints, they traded every draft pick they had to acquire you. And that puts a big, I don't want to say target on your back, but the amount of, hey, look, this guy's a savior of a franchise that to that point had never won a playoff game. Like was really a franchise in need of help. When you were drafted, like that day, when they traded their whole class, were you like, this is awesome, they believe in me this much? Or was it more like, oh my God, they just traded their whole draft class for me? Like this is a lot. I'm just curious your perspective, since literally you're the only person in the world that has that perspective.
Yeah, so it was neither and both. I think, first I was pissed off because I slipped all the way to the fifth pick. So it was kind of mixed feelings. And I think if you talk to any great athlete, they'll tell you, we put more pressure on ourselves than anyone can put on us from the outside. And the thing about mental health, social anxiety, and anxiety in general, it's what I've learned is that it's just information, and what I learned ultimately was, playing football wasn't where I was supposed to be. And so when I finally figured that out, the social anxiety started to disappear.
Ricky, what are you most excited that you're involved with today? Because I think you've got an astrology dating website or app. I believe you're still working with Elevate Dispensary. Is that accurate?
Yeah. We're working with Elevate. Yeah.
And we've got the NFT that we're working with today, and anything that's not public on your journey right now. Like what brings you the most joy today?
Yeah, so I do a lot of different things, and what brings me the most joy is my different interests as they converge. But I'd say if I had to pick one thing I was most passionate about, it's the work I'm doing with astrology, and it's not a dating app; it's a relationship app.
Okay.
Because we all have relationships, with our kids, with our friends, with our siblings, and being able to understand ourselves and understand other people better makes those relationships work out better. So, helping people get along is my passion. Helping people stop judging each other and really seeing who's there is my passion.
Yeah, what was the story that you had? Either there's an equipment guy or a trainer who only knew you with the dreadlocks, and you showed up without, and he didn't even know who you were. Like you were just this sort of like he didn't see you at all.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And I think a lot of famous people have that experience, is that people get so caught up in what we've accomplished that they don't see us. And so that's something I was very sensitive to in my playing days. And so it makes sense that, when I left football, one of the things that was most important to me, what I was looking for, was to truly be seen. And the person who saw me most, she looked at my astrological chart. And so I became intrigued and started studying, and it's become my life's work.
What's your sign?
I'm a Gemini.
And what does that mean to you? I need to know, Ricky. I'm looking for something over here as a Leo.
Yeah. So,
I too am a Leo, so I have questions.
Well, I think so. It's permission. Okay. It's permission, right? So an example, right? Sometimes, we're given a hard time when we feel like we need to be the center of attention. Okay. But a Leo truly needs to be the center of attention. Right. And so a Gemini needs new information. Okay. They need to learn. They'll get bored if they're doing the same thing over and over again. That's really good information to know about yourself. Right. Because then you don't try to fit yourself in a box of people telling you you're supposed to be a certain way. You have more permission to be curious as a Gemini.
That is very interesting. Like I said, I like Carm also Leo, and that definitely fits. You ended up walking away from the game after playing a long career, and 1 year in Baltimore. You could have stayed. You had a fine season. You could have been on the team. Ended up retiring. And I feel like I wasn't going to ask this guy. I feel like I know the answer just based off this conversation, but we're talking about not judging it. So I'm curious, like, was it hard for you to walk away, or were you just, hey, you seem like the reason I say it is you seem like the kind of guy who just could say, I'm good. I'm done. I'm ready to move on. But you also dedicated a huge part of your life to being, I don't think people understand how hard it is to be a professional athlete, the time it takes, the dedication. Was it easy for you to walk away, Ricky, or was it hard?
I think it's only easy for people to walk away when they've given their all, because then you just know it's time to do something else. And it was funny. So after that, my last year in Baltimore, I was talking to the coaches after the season, and they were going back and reviewing all the film. And a couple of them came back to me and they said, as we watched the film on offense, we feel like the biggest mistake we made all year was not getting you more involved in the offense. And so I thought, wow, what a great compliment. And that actually got me really excited about coming back for another season. And it was early February. I got a text message from Bill Parcells, and I was sharing with him, how excited I was about coming back for another year. And his response kind of shocked me a little bit, shocked me into retirement. He said, "Don't chase this thing too long. You can contribute in other ways." And it was shocking that it came from Parcells. And so it got me thinking a little bit, and I started thinking there are other ways I can contribute. And then I thought, but I know the Ravens are going to the Super Bowl this next year. But still, I had a vision that there are other things that I wanted to do. And so I made the choice, and I walked away and jumped right into my second life.
Well, and you were there snapping photographs as a member of the media. Congratulations on joining the dark side, by the way, at least in that moment. Your coaches are, these are the biggest names in NFL and college football history. Nick Saban, Bill Parcells, Mike Ditka. Who do you maintain a relationship with today?
I still stay in touch with Nick. I still stay in touch with Ditka, Parcells. These are really like football coaches, like old school football coaches. And what I mean by that is coaches that appreciate football players, football players. And by that, I mean, it's an attitude or a mentality. And I think that's what I'm most proud of my days playing football, not the 10,000 yards or the all-pro year leading the NFL in rushing, but it's that anyone that played against me, anyone that coached me, they'll describe me as a football player.
With Parcells, obviously he was never your coach. He was an executive with Miami. He was up in the box. How did that relationship come about? Because of course you're going to have some interaction anytime with an exec on a team, but it's not like you had a relationship like you did maybe with Nick or with Dave Wannstedt or Mike Dick or somebody who's in the locker room with you every day, day in and day out.
Actually, he was in the locker room every day.
He was in the locker room. I guess that fits Bill.
There's this funny story. So it was 2009. I was playing running back, and Ronnie and I were splitting time, and Ronnie Brown had a foot injury, and so I had to take over full time. And that Monday when I got to the locker room, there was an old gas can. There's an old gas can sitting by my locker. And I walked up and I was like, what is this? And a couple of minutes later, Parcells walks by and he's like, you got any gas left in that tank? So yeah, I'll tell you this. That's a good question. So when the Dolphins hired Bill Parcells, this was at the end of Cam Cameron's one disastrous year as the Miami Dolphins head coach.
Yeah.
And during that season, I'd come back from a suspension week 10. Okay, I came back week 10 against the Steelers, and in the second quarter of that game, I tore my pec, and so I was on IR. And so I was pretty much at home. I come in and do rehab, but I was chilling. And then this is when the Dolphins hired Bill Parcells. So Bill Parcells comes in, and I get a call, says, come in, there's a meeting today. So he comes in and he walks in, and the first thing he does is has this big book, right? And it's the injury log from that season. And he drops it on the table, right? And he says, if your name is in this book, there's a good chance you're not going to be here next year. And like, he just gave us like a hardball talk about you can't play if you're hurt. And he just heard a lot of things, and he's going to get rid of all the bad players. Right. So I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I just came back from a suspension and I got hurt. So I'm thinking, I wonder where I'm going to be playing next year. and so after the meeting, someone says, Bill wants to talk to you, come into his office. And so I was like, wow, that was quick, So I go up there and I sit down, and he's like, I heard about you, and everyone I've talked to has had wonderful things to say. So I believe in you, and I want you to be a part of this team. I was blown away. But it seems like he really took pride and took responsibility in really helping me get my career back on track. And he was not only, an executive, but he was also a mentor. We had a really close relationship those years that we were both in Miami.
Well, it speaks to your character, Ricky, and it's one of the reasons why we were so excited to talk to you today, because, I mean, you're one of the most talented guys in the history of the league. I don't think anybody would argue that, but it's your journey, I think, is, at least for me, is the most interesting part, and the ability to take risk in the middle of your career and follow whatever was inside you, which I think you probably understand better today, like hopefully we all do as we get older. What do you, and I don't think you can even answer this question because it's moment by moment, but 10 years out from now, like where do you, or 5 years out, whatever, a year out, where do you see yourself? Where do you want to be? How do you want to be given back? Like what's kind of the flag that you're planting right now as to where you're headed?
Well, just that I'm I think reaching more people, really. I mean, I feel really good about my experiences and what I've learned, and I feel like I have a message, and so really doing more work to get that message out.
Yeah,
I think I know we're almost up against it with the half hour. I just wanted to ask, for you, you've done so many things. I mean, really, you go to Texas, you have an all-time career at an iconic college institution for football. Then you play for some phenomenal years in the NFL, whether it's in New Orleans or obviously Miami, where you mentioned you led the league in rushing, all Pro Bowl, the whole deal. And then you walked away, and you've done so much since then. When you think about your life to this point, and like Mark just said, there's so much to go, but when you think about it to where it's at, I mean, how much do you really even think about football on this point? Do you think a lot about like what you accomplished as a football player, or is that just like, hey, look, that's what I did for a living. I loved it, but now I'm on to so many other things. That's just a part of my journey. It's not necessarily who I am.
Well, good question. So, I had this moment, they say when you're dying that your whole life flashes in front of you. And I haven't died yet or even had a near-death experience. But when I called the NFL to retire, to make that decision to retire in 2004, I literally saw my whole life flash in front of me and realized that every major event in my life was somehow tied to football, and it was a scary moment to give that up. And if you think about it, at the end of life, what we remember is not really the details, right? It's really what we take with us is what we've gleaned, what we've learned, what, the essence of all those experiences. And so, like the trophies and all the accomplishments, whatever, right? But what I learned in the process of reaching those accomplishments, those are still with me and continue to grow and evolve. And that's what I love about football. It's such a intense, way to grow and to evolve. I mean, at the core of it, right, you get smacked in the face and you got like 30, 40 seconds to get back up and do it again. Okay. And this is a great metaphor for life, because life does smack you. And if you can get up and do it again and be stronger in the fourth quarter, right, you're going to live a good life.
You got some great cliches going on there, but it's so true. Not how many times you get knocked down, how quickly you get back up, and your attitude coming back to it. Hey, Ricky, so much. We so much appreciate the time today, and hope you have huge success with the NFT. Of course, putting it out there, and really looking forward to continue just to follow your journey. And you're a huge gift to athletes and everybody else out there, Ricky. So thanks for being with us, and thanks for everything you're doing.
That means a lot. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
All right.